Welcome back, everyone, to Haunted Tales. Tonight, we descend into the heart of Colorado, a land of towering peaks and endless wilderness, where beauty often hides something far darker. Behind the postcard landscapes lie shadows, secrets, and spirits that refuse to rest. In this episode, I bring you 10 of the most disturbing true horror stories ever whispered from the Rocky Mountain State. These accounts come from police files, survivor testimonies, and chilling first-hand encounters that still torment those who lived through them. Some names and details have been altered to protect the privacy of the victims and their families, but the terror remains exactly as it was. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to Haunted Tales and hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight, and as you listen, let us know which story chills you the most. So settle in, turn down the lights, and brace yourself. For in Colorado, the mountains don't just echo with wind, they echo with screams. And tonight, you're going to hear them. Highway 285 is one of those roads that feels older than it should. It winds south from Denver, cutting through Morrison and into the deep folds of Colorado's wilderness. By daylight, it's scenic. Rolling hills, pines thick as walls, and mountains looming like great stone guardians. Families travel it on weekends, tourists use it to reach mountain cabins, and truckers know it as a lifeline through the Rockies. But when the sun sinks and darkness settles across the ridges, Highway 285 becomes something else. The silence grows heavy. The shadows stretch across the asphalt, turning bends into yawning mouths of blackness. It is here, on lonely stretches near Morrison, that countless travelers have reported the same impossible sight, a woman in white standing by the roadside, waiting for a ride she will never finish. The origins of the phantom hitchhiker trace back to the early 1950s. Local archives tell of a tragedy on a rain-slicked night. A young woman, her name differing across reports, some call her Margaret Reed, others Helen Parker, was driving home with her fiancé after celebrating their engagement in Morrison. Some say she wore her wedding dress, still glowing pale against the storm. Their car lost traction on a sharp curve. It skidded off the highway, plunging into a ravine. The fiancé was thrown clear, badly injured but alive. Margaret was not so fortunate. She died instantly, her body pinned in the wreckage until rescuers arrived hours later. For a time, it was only a local tragedy. But then the stories began. Drivers swore they saw a young woman in white thumbing for a ride. Others claimed she appeared inside their vehicles, only to vanish before they reached town. The accident was long forgotten by newspapers, but the figure never left Highway 285. The first major testimony came from James Carter, a long-haul trucker, in 1979. His logbook recorded the time, 2:12 a.m. "I saw her by the shoulder," Carter told state police. "She wasn't waving. She wasn't panicked. She just stood there, thumb out, white dress blowing in the wind." He pulled his rig over. The woman approached slowly, climbed into the passenger seat without a word, and folded her hands in her lap. She never looked at me. I kept asking if she was okay. Nothing, no sound. 5 miles later, Carter glanced at the seat. Empty, the door hadn't opened. There was no sound, no movement. She was simply gone. Carter was so shaken he filed a report at the Morrison station. Police dismissed it as fatigue. But Carter, a man who had driven highways all across the country, never touched Highway 285 again. Years later, in 1996, Emily Rodriguez, a University of Denver student, had her encounter. She was driving home after a late-night shift at work when rain pounded the road. My headlights caught her standing there. She was soaked in this long white dress. She looked desperate. Emily pulled over. The woman climbed into the back seat, dripping water onto the upholstery. Emily asked where she was headed, but the passenger didn't reply. Minutes later, Emily checked her rearview mirror. The seat was empty. The smell of wet earth lingered, Emily said. The seatbelt was swaying like someone had just moved. I nearly drove off the road. For months afterward, Emily swore her car carried the faint smell of rain every time she drove that stretch of 285. Colorado State Patrol has its own file on Highway 285, full of strange 911 calls. In 2008, Trooper Mark Hollins responded to a report of a woman stepping into traffic. I searched half a mile both ways. Nothing, Holland said later, but I couldn't shake the feeling someone was behind me, watching. His dash cam recorded 3 frames, just 3, of a pale figure standing beyond the guardrail. Officially, it was chalked up to camera interference. Holland's requested reassignment months later. Not all accounts come from travelers. Eleanor Martin, who lived in Morrison her entire life, spoke of seeing the figure as a child in the 1960s. "My father used to warn us," she said. "He said, don't stop if you see her. Just keep driving." Eleanor remembered one night when her father's truck hit something. They pulled over, but the road was empty. Only a handprint smeared across the windshield. Small, pale, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. In 2010, a Denver ghost hunting group staked out the road with night vision cameras. At exactly midnight, their radios picked up static layered with faint words. "Help me." A thermal camera captured a heat signature in the shape of a human form near the tree line. Seconds later, it disappeared. The group reported footsteps circling their van, though no one was outside. They left the area in panic, equipment abandoned. In 2017, Daniel Reese, an Uber driver, shared his story. He was ferrying a passenger south when he saw a woman on the shoulder. His passenger gasped, "Stop, she looks hurt." Daniel pulled over. The passenger rolled down the window to ask if she needed help. But the woman was gone. 1 second there, the next, nothing. Both swore she had been inches away, her face pale, her eyes fixed on them. Daniel quit driving night shift soon after. More unsettling than sightings are the disappearances. Over the decades, abandoned cars have been discovered on Highway 285, engines cold, keys in the ignition, doors locked, but no drivers. Locals whisper these people may have stopped for her, and unlike others, they never came back. Perhaps the most harrowing account came from David Larkin, a retired firefighter. "I saw her in the middle of the lane. Slammed the brakes. My truck passed through her. Cold like ice water flooding me." He stopped, shaking. In the rearview mirror, he saw her again, standing on the center line, watching, then she was gone. "I've run into burning buildings," he said, "but nothing has ever scared me like that night." By now, the phantom hitchhiker of Highway 285 is more than folklore. Too many testimonies, too many reports, too many terrified drivers. Some believe she is Margaret Reed, forever replaying her final journey. Others think she is every soul lost on that stretch, a collective echo of tragedy. Whatever she is, she's still there. Truckers whisper about her. Police admit off the record they've seen her. And drivers still call 911, voices shaking, swearing they nearly hit a woman who vanished before their eyes. Highway 285 near Morrison is beautiful by day, but when night falls, it belongs to the dead. If you drive it after midnight, keep your eyes on the shoulder. You may see her, pale, silent, waiting. Some say if you don't stop, she'll vanish in the trees. But if you do, you may never finish the ride. And if you glance into your rearview mirror and see someone sitting where no one should be, remember, you've joined the long line of witnesses who swear Highway 285 is haunted by a woman forever trapped in her final journey because the hitchhiker is still waiting. Highway 285 winds southward out of Denver, a stretch of asphalt that threads through Morrison before dissolving into the darkness of the Rockies. By day, it feels ordinary enough. Cars rush toward ski towns, trucks barrel through, and locals make their way home. But at night, the highway changes. The mountains cast long shadows over the road. The trees lean close. And the only illumination comes from the stabbing beams of headlights. For decades, this stretch near Morrison has carried whispers of something, someone, waiting by the roadside. She is always described the same, a pale woman dressed in white, her expression mournful, her presence fleeting. Witnesses claim she appears suddenly at the edge of the road, her thumb out, desperate for a ride. And yet, those who stop to help never make it to her destination, because she vanishes. Local folklore ties the woman to a car crash in the late 1950s. The story goes that a young woman named Margaret Maggie Collins, newly engaged, was driving back from Denver with her fiancé after a celebration. Rain slicked the asphalt. A curve was taken too quickly. The car careened off the road and rolled down an embankment. Her fiancé died instantly. Maggie crawled from the wreckage, her white dress torn and soaked in blood, stumbling onto the highway in search of help. But before she could reach another vehicle, another car struck her. Witnesses from that night swore they saw a woman in white running into the road, But when police arrived, her body was never found. Only scraps of fabric and bloodstains marked the scene. From that night onward, drivers have sworn that Maggie never left Highway 285. One of the earliest modern accounts came from Ray Jensen, a long-haul trucker. In 1979, he was heading toward Buena Vista in the dead of night when he spotted her. "I saw this girl on the shoulder," Ray recalled in a later interview. "She was wearing a dress, old-fashioned, white. Looked like she'd been in an accident. Hair matted, face pale. I slowed down and pulled over." Colorado has no shortage of haunted roads, but few carry as much ghostly weight as Phantom Canyon Road. This narrow dirt path winding between Florence and Cripple Creek is more than just a scenic byway. It is the backbone of the gold rush era, once traveled by fortune seekers, gamblers, and men who would kill for a handful of ore. Today, it's a lonely road lined with crumbling mining ruins and weathered bridges. At night, it lives up to its name. Travelers speak of sudden mists rolling down from the mountains, lantern lights swaying in the dark, and the sound of footsteps crunching gravel when no one is there. For over a century, Phantom Canyon has carried stories of the dead who never left. The miners who dug too deep, the men who were murdered for gold, the prisoners who died working these treacherous tunnels. Their spirits are said to walk the canyon still. The road was carved in the late 1800s, linking Florence to Cripple Creek during the height of the gold rush. Over 500 mines dotted the hills, and countless men came chasing riches. For some, the canyon became their grave. Conditions were brutal. Miners worked 12-hour shifts in the freezing dark, explosions and cave-ins a constant threat. Violence was rampant. Claim jumpers, robberies, and drunken brawls turned deadly. Locals recall stories of men who vanished into the tunnels, their bodies never recovered, their voices still echoing underground. And then there were the chain gangs. Convicts were forced to carve out sections of the road, many dying from exhaustion, rock slides, or accidents with tools. Their bodies were buried hastily in unmarked graves along the canyon walls. It's little wonder locals believe those who died here never found peace. The first recorded ghost sighting dates back to 1893. Travelers reported a spectral stagecoach racing down the canyon at impossible speed, wheels clattering, horses screaming, the driver's face skeletal and grinning beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Some said it belonged to an outlaw gang who robbed a gold shipment and fled into Phantom Canyon, only to vanish without a trace. Others claim the stagecoach crashed during a midnight run, killing everyone aboard. To this day, drivers report the thunder of hooves behind them, only to turn and find the road empty. One chilling account comes from William Billy Harper, a rancher who lived near the canyon in the 1920s. "I was driving my wagon back toward Florence late one night when I heard horses coming up behind me fast. I pulled off the road, thinking some fool was going to run me down. But when I looked back, I swear on my life, there was a stagecoach, black as coal, flying past me. Driver's face was pale as bone, eyes hollow. Then it vanished, just gone." His story circulated in newspapers, and soon Phantom Canyon gained its name. But the most terrifying apparitions belong not to the stagecoach, but the miners themselves. Travelers often describe lantern lights bobbing in the distance, swaying gently as if carried by unseen hands. Some have reported approaching, thinking they'd found hikers or fellow drivers, only for the lights to flicker and disappear. Others describe men in ragged work clothes, faces blackened with soot, silently standing at the roadside. When cars slow, the figures melt back into the shadows. One particularly gruesome legend tells of a miner named Elias Grant, who was murdered by fellow workers during a dispute over gold. They struck him with a pickaxe and left his body in the shaft. Locals claim Elias appears on stormy nights, his skull caved in, holding a lantern that casts no light. In the summer of 1974, a couple named Mark and Linda Travers decided to take Phantom Canyon Road as a shortcut on their way to Cripple Creek. It was well after midnight, and they found themselves alone on the twisting dirt path. Linda recalled, "We saw lights ahead, thought maybe another car was coming. But it wasn't headlights. It was a row of lanterns, like miners walking in a line. I counted 6 of them. They were moving toward us." Mark slowed down, and then they vanished, just flickered out all at once. The road was empty. They later told friends that the air had grown unbearably heavy, smelling of smoke and sulfur, before clearing as if nothing had happened. History also remembers the convicts who were forced to work on Phantom Canyon Road. Many were hardened criminals. Others were men caught stealing bread or unable to pay debts. Shackled together, they dug and blasted their way through unforgiving terrain. Accidents were frequent. Dynamite misfires, falling rock, or sheer exhaustion claimed lives. Their graves were shallow, unmarked, and forgotten. Modern hikers claim to hear the metallic clink of chains dragging across the gravel, and some report the sensation of being watched from the canyon walls. Paranormal groups who visited in the 1990s recorded what sounded like moaning, echoing faintly through the trees. In 2001, a photographer named Rachel Owens traveled Phantom Canyon to capture images of its historic bridges. She parked her Jeep at dusk and set up her camera near an abandoned mine entrance. Through her lens, she caught movement. Several men in outdated mining gear were trudging up the hillside, lantern swaying. She lowered the camera. Nothing was there. She raised it again. The figures were closer. Terrified, she fled, leaving half her equipment behind. Later, when she developed her photos, one frame revealed a blurred shape. A man's face, eyes hollow, mouth open in what looked like a scream. At night, Phantom Canyon is a place that gnaws at your senses. The road is narrow, hugging cliffs on one side and sheer drops on the other. The sound of the wind through the canyon mimics voices, low and mournful. The smell of pine mixes with something sharper, like burning coal or damp stone. When your headlights sweep across the ruins of old mining camps, shadows leap in unnatural ways, and it's easy to imagine men still working, forever bound to their claims. In 2013, the Colorado Paranormal Society conducted an overnight investigation in Phantom Canyon. Using thermal cameras and audio recorders, they reported several strange events. Temperature drops of 30 degrees within seconds. Disembodied voices captured on tape. One whispering, "Get back to work." A thermal image showing the outline of a man crouched near a rock. Though no one was present, their report concluded that Phantom Canyon was one of the most active paranormal locations in the state. Even in recent years, drivers continue to report strange happenings. In 2019, a group of off-road enthusiasts traveling at night swore they saw a figure waving them down. The man was tall, dressed in suspenders and a miner's helmet. When they stopped to offer help, he vanished into thin air. One of them later said, "We weren't drunk. We weren't high. We all saw him. Same face, same clothes. He was just gone." Phantom Canyon Road is more than a passage through Colorado's mining history. It is a graveyard stretched across 25 miles of dirt and stone. Every bridge, every abandoned tunnel, every echo carries the weight of men who suffered, fought, and died here. Some believe they linger out of greed, still searching for gold they never found. Others think they remain trapped by violence, chained to the canyon walls. But whatever their reason, travelers swear the road earns its name. The stagecoach that never reaches its stop, the miners who never leave their shafts, the prisoners who never escape their chains. They are all still here, and if you find yourself on Phantom Canyon Road after dark, keep your eyes on the shadows. Because when the lantern light appears in the distance, it may already be too late. The drive into Phantom Canyon is not for the faint of heart. Even in daylight, the dirt road clings precariously to the mountainside, the cliffs dropping hundreds of feet into black emptiness. Rusted mining equipment still litters the roadside, relics from another century, reminders of how fragile life was, and still is, here. At night, though, the road transforms. The canyon closes in, and the world narrows to the reach of your headlights. The silence is suffocating, broken only by the crunch of gravel under your tires. Locals say that in these hours, the veil between the living and the dead thins. The spirits of the miners, the outlaws, the convicts, all those swallowed by the canyon, wander freely. In the late 1800s, Cripple Creek was one of the richest gold strikes in America. Men poured into the region, building camps, saloons, and brothels, all connected by Phantom Canyon Road. For every fortune won, dozens of lives were lost. Cave-ins buried miners alive. Dynamite blasts took arms, legs, and eyes. Rival claimants settled disputes. Colorado's mountains rise like sleeping giants, their peaks dusted white, their valleys thick with shadow. In the 1800s, men believed these mountains hid riches, veins of gold that could make them kings. They dug into the rock like ants, tunneling deeper and deeper, chasing fortune. But the earth demanded payment. For every man who struck it rich, dozens more were buried alive in shafts, crushed by rock slides, or suffocated in darkness. One town in particular bears the scars of this hunger for gold: Central City. Once nicknamed the richest square mile on earth, it was a place where gamblers, outlaws, and miners rubbed shoulders in dim saloons. But beneath the whiskey and laughter, the earth groaned with restless dead. For every vein pulled from the mountain, men vanished without graves. And if you believe the locals, they never left. The road that leads into Central City, the Central City Parkway, is said to be haunted by these miners. They appear in the dead of night, still covered in soot, lanterns glowing with an unholy green light. Travelers have seen them walking the shoulder of the highway, silent, hollow-eyed, trudging as if still climbing their way out of the mines. The first haunting, the truckers' encounter, it was January 1993. Snow fell in heavy sheets across the mountains, and Gary Henson, a Denver trucker, was hauling food supplies to the casinos in Central City. He described the night as smothered, like the air itself was made of wool. His headlights carved weak tunnels through the storm as he climbed the parkway's twisting curves. Around midnight, he saw a man standing on the roadside. At first, he thought it was a stranded traveler. The figure wore ragged pants, suspenders, and a dented helmet. In his hand was a lantern glowing faint green, cutting through the swirling snow. Gary slowed the truck, ready to help. But as he drew closer, the man lifted his head. Gary swore his face was crushed. Bones caved inward, jaw twisted, blood frozen against his skin. The miner's eyes were hollow pits, black as coal. Before Gary could stop, the figure simply dissolved into the snowstorm, scattering like ash. Gary didn't tell the police. But later, in a saloon, he shared the story with a bartender. The man didn't laugh. He only nodded and said, "You saw the miners. You're not the first. You won't be the last." The history buried beneath the mountains around Central City are littered with tragedy. The most infamous was the Knot Mine disaster of 1884. 46 men descended into the shafts that morning. A methane spark, some say from a careless lamp, triggered an explosion. The tunnels collapsed. 23 men were killed instantly, their bodies crushed under tons of rock. Dozens more suffocated in the darkness as poison gas filled the caverns. Rescuers dug furiously for days, but the mountain refused to give up all its dead. Many of the miners were left entombed in stone, their bodies never recovered. Old newspapers reported strange details, muffled cries heard days after the collapse, the echo of picks striking rock when no one was inside. Some swore the dead were still trying to dig themselves out, and perhaps they still are. The Lopez family, nearly 120 years later. The Lopez family was driving home from Denver after a birthday celebration. It was February 2003, and the parkway was slick with ice. In the back seat, 12-year-old Marisol Lopez drowsed against the window, watching snowflakes smear against the glass. Then she saw the lights. Small, flickering lanterns glowing green on the roadside. At first, she thought they were fireflies. But as the headlights swept across them, shapes emerged. 5 men trudged single file along the shoulder, hunched under invisible weight. Their clothes were torn, their skin black with soot. One turned his head toward the car. His face was gray, sagging, one eye missing, the other burned coal black. Marisol screamed. Her mother gasped. Her father slowed, stunned, staring at the figures. But before they could react, the miners stepped off the road and vanished into the hillside. When the family told their relatives in Central City, the response was chilling. "You saw them?" an aunt whispered. "The ones who never made it home." Folklore and fear among locals, the phantom miners are more than just ghost stories. They're warnings. Some believe the miners appear before disasters, serving as omens. Others say they're cursed, bound to walk the roads forever, searching for a way home. An old sheriff once admitted to a journalist, "We used to get calls, reports of men walking the road with lanterns. We'd go out, find nothing, but the calls came again and again. Always the same story, always the same road." The investigators in 2010, a paranormal team from Boulder set up cameras along the parkway. For 2 nights, nothing. Then, on the 3rd night, one camera captured movement. The footage showed faint green orbs drifting along the roadside. For a moment, the lights merged into the shape of a man with a lantern, shoulders hunched, trudging slowly forward. The team also recorded sound. A steady rhythm beneath the wind, metal striking rock, tap, tap, tap. Skeptics dismissed it as edited, but among ghost hunters the footage became infamous, one of the clearest glimpses of the miners ever captured. The cab driver, perhaps the most terrifying encounter, happened in 2015. Alan Peters, a cab driver from Black Hawk, often drove the parkway at night. One foggy evening near the old cemetery, he spotted a man waving him down. The passenger wore ragged overalls, face blackened with soot, a cracked helmet on his head. He climbed in silently, setting a faintly glowing lantern on his lap. For 5 minutes, Alan drove in silence. The man didn't speak. Alan tried to make small talk, but the passenger only stared out the window. When Alan glanced in the rearview mirror, the seat was empty, but the lantern was still there, flickering weakly. Alan slammed the brakes, turned to look, and the lantern vanished into thin air. He never drove that route again. The fourth account. The college students in 2018. 2 CU Boulder students drove to Central City late at night after losing money at Blackhawk's casinos. Around 2 a.m., their car broke down near a pull-off on the parkway. As they waited for a tow, they noticed a glow moving up the road. At first, they thought it was another car, but the glow was small, bobbing, and accompanied by the outline of a man. He carried a lantern. His steps dragged slow and uneven. As he drew closer, the students realized his legs were twisted, bones bent unnaturally. His head lolled to one side, the jaw slack. Terrified, the students locked their doors. The figure passed directly in front of their car. When they blinked, he was gone, vanished without a trace. The tow truck driver later told them, "Happens all the time out here. You broke down where the old shafts run underneath. Those men never left. Why green lanterns?" One detail unsettles researchers the most: the lanterns. Nearly every report describes them glowing an unnatural green. Some suggest it's because of phosphorescent minerals common in Colorado mines, which could create strange glowing effects. But others believe it's something darker. Green, in folklore, often represents death, the sickly color of decay, the glow of spirits not at rest. Whatever the cause, the lanterns always appear first, hovering in the dark, drawing travelers' eyes. By the time you notice the figures carrying them, it's too late. The unresolved haunting. The phantom miners remain one of Colorado's most persistent ghost legends. Their appearances span decades, witnessed by truckers, families, bartenders, students, even police. Always the same details, always the same road. Some locals claim the spirits are tied to the mountain, cursed to walk until their bodies are finally found. Others think they're searching for new souls, dragging the living down to join them underground. Even now, travelers report seeing flickering lanterns along the parkway. Some hear the faint sound of picks striking rock beneath the earth, and a few swear they've glimpsed soot-covered faces staring back at them through the glass of their car windows. So if you ever find yourself driving into Central City at night, keep your eyes forward. Do not stop for lanterns on the roadside. Do not let curiosity pull you closer, because what you're seeing is not alive, and they may be waiting for you to take their place in the dark. The old mining town of Silver Plume, Colorado, sits tucked high in the Rocky Mountains, clinging to steep slopes just off Interstate 70. Once a booming silver camp in the late 1800s, it's now little more than a ghost town. A handful of creaky wooden buildings, a few stubborn residents, and the ever-present shadow of its past. At first glance, Silver Plume is picturesque. Snow-capped ridges loom above, and the crumbling remnants of ore mills dot the mountainside. But ask any local who has lived here long enough, and they'll warn you that the town holds something darker, a spirit from its mining days. They call him the Phantom Miner, a figure of soot and sorrow said to wander the old roads, tunnels and alleys of Silver Plume. His lantern flickers in the night. His footsteps echo where no man walks, and his whispers drift through the empty streets when the wind is still. The first tragedy. The story begins in 1884, at the height of the silver rush. Mining was brutal, dangerous work. Men labored 12 hours a day underground, breathing in dust, choking on smoke. Their lives balanced between fortune and death. That winter, a collapse buried 7 men alive in the 730 mine. Rescue crews worked for 3 days through snowstorms to reach them. By the time the last body was pulled out, it was too late. Among the dead was Thomas Kent, a young man only 23 years old, newly married, his wife expecting their first child. Locals swore Thomas never truly left the mine. The lantern in the snow. The first recorded sighting came just weeks later. A watchman stationed near the mill claimed he saw a lone lantern bobbing along the ridge well after midnight. Thinking it was a worker, he climbed the trail to investigate. The tracks in the snow led partway up, then stopped. The lantern glow moved ahead another 50 feet, but when the watchman reached the spot, there was nothing there. No man, no prints, just silence. The town whispered, Thomas is still searching for a way out. The widow's cry. Thomas's widow, Mary Kent, claimed she too heard him. Neighbors said that in the weeks after the collapse, she would stand outside her cabin at night, weeping, insisting she could hear Thomas calling her name from the hills. On one night in February, her neighbor swore he saw a dark figure at her window, its hand pressed against the glass. By the time he rushed over, Mary was alone inside, trembling, pale, insisting Thomas had come to say goodbye. Within months, Mary left Silver Plume, but Thomas, it seemed, did not. Decades of sightings over the next century, the legend grew. Miners, travelers, and later tourists reported strange encounters. The details were eerily consistent. A tall figure in ragged mining clothes, a lantern glowing dimly, swinging in silence, the smell of coal smoke and damp earth, whispers echoing in the wind, sometimes calling names, sometimes murmuring prayers. In the 1930s, a maintenance worker for the Georgetown Loop Railroad refused to finish his job near Silver Plume after claiming he saw a man covered in soot vanish into the tunnel wall. His foreman laughed, until the same worker was found 2 days later, dead of a heart attack, his face frozen in terror. The 1970 backpackers, 2 hikers exploring abandoned tunnels near Silver Plume in 1970, stumbled on something that has haunted them for life. They entered a shaft, flashlights slicing through the dark. About 20 yards in, their beams caught a figure ahead. A man hunched over, his face hidden, holding a lantern that burned with an oddly green flame. "Hello?" one of them called. The figure slowly straightened. His face, if it was a face, was caked in black dust. Hollow eye sockets glared through them. Then, without a word, he turned and walked deeper into the mine. They followed for a moment, but then realized the sound of his footsteps was gone, though the light kept moving. When it finally faded into blackness, their flashlights sputtered and died. The 2 men fled, not stopping until they reached the highway. The ghost at the saloon, the Silver Plume Saloon, one of the few operating businesses left in town, has its own share of reports. Bartenders say that on certain winter nights, when snow batters the windows, the back door creaks open though no one enters. The smell of coal and iron fills the air, and glasses rattle on the shelves. One old bartender swears he once saw a man in a filthy mining coat sitting at the far end of the bar. He poured him a drink and watched in horror as the glass slid down the counter and tipped over, though the stool was empty. The modern trucker in 1998, a truck driver named Earl Simmons, was hauling supplies up I-70 when he decided to pull off at Silver Plume to rest. It was near midnight when he parked by the edge of town. Snow fell heavy, blanketing everything in white. Earl leaned back in his cab, half asleep, when he noticed a faint glow outside, a lantern, moving across the street. Curious, he climbed down and followed. The figure was just ahead, tall, broad-shouldered, with a bent posture, holding the swaying light. "Hey!" Earl shouted. The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned into an alley between two crumbling houses. Earl hurried after him, but when he stepped into the narrow gap, he froze. The alley was empty. Just snow, undisturbed. The lantern glow was gone, but in the silence, Earl heard something that made his stomach twist. A voice, low, hoarse. "Get back! Get back underground." Earl left town that night and never returned. Paranormal investigators in 2010, a team of ghost hunters visited Silver Plume, eager to document the legend. They set up cameras inside an abandoned boarding house once used by miners. For hours, nothing. But just after 3 a.m., one camera caught movement, a dim light swaying across the hall. Seconds later, a shadow passed in front of the lens. When the team reviewed the audio, they heard faint breathing. Then, a single word whispered close to the microphone. "Help." The footage has since circulated online. Debated fiercely, but many locals say it only proves what they've known for over a century. Thomas Kent never left Silver Plume. The curse of Silver Plume, some locals believe the haunting is more than just one miner. They claim the entire town is cursed, doomed by the greed and blood spilled during the Silver Rush. The mines were built on dangerous ground, with little regard for safety. Countless men died in collapses, fires, and explosions. Their bodies were often left buried where they fell, sealed into the rock forever. To this day, hikers sometimes report strange depressions in the earth, sudden cave-ins with no explanation, as if the ground itself remembers. And when the wind cuts through the valley, it often carries what sounds like voices, men crying out, begging to be freed. The present day, Silver Plume remains small, quiet, half abandoned. But those who live there still see him. The phantom miner wandering with his lantern, searching for something he'll never find. Some nights, tourists on I-70 glance toward the dark cluster of buildings and swear they see a flickering light weaving through the trees. Some claim to hear faint hammering echo across the canyon, and occasionally, someone brave enough to enter the old mines comes back pale, shaking, insisting they saw a man in the dark, and that he followed them until they reached daylight. Final reflection. The phantom miner of Silver Plume is more than a campfire tale. His story is etched into the town's history, whispered by generations of locals, reinforced by endless sightings. Is he truly Thomas Kent, the young man crushed in the collapse of 1884? Or is he every miner who met his end in those dark shafts? Perhaps Silver Plume is simply too soaked in tragedy to rest. What's certain is this: Silver Plume feels different. Walk its streets after dark and you'll sense it. The weight of history pressing down. The silence that doesn't feel empty. The way your breath seems too loud against the mountain's stillness. And if you stay long enough, you may see it yourself. A flickering lantern in the night, bobbing just ahead. Always just out of reach. The phantom miner and still wandering. Still searching, forever lost in the shadows of Silver Plume. The old mining town of Silver Plume, Colorado, sits tucked high in the Rocky Mountains, clinging to steep slopes just off Interstate 70. Once a booming silver camp in the late 1800s, it's now little more than a ghost town. A handful of creaky wooden buildings, a few stubborn residents, and the ever-present shadow of its past. At first glance, Silver Plume is picturesque. Snow-capped ridges loom above, and the crumbling remnants of ore mills dot the mountainside. But ask any local who has lived here long enough, and they'll warn you that the town holds something darker, a spirit from its mining days. They call him the Phantom Miner, a figure of soot and sorrow said to wander the old roads, tunnels and alleys of Silver Plume. His lantern flickers in the night. His footsteps echo where no man walks, and his whispers drift through the empty streets when the wind is still. The first tragedy. The story begins in 1884, at the height of the silver rush. Mining was brutal, dangerous work. Men labored 12 hours a day underground, breathing in dust, choking on smoke. Their lives balanced between fortune and death. That winter, a collapse buried 7 men alive in the 730 mine. Rescue crews worked for 3 days through snowstorms to reach them. By the time the last body was pulled out, it was too late. Among the dead was Thomas Kent, a young man only 23 years old, newly married. His wife expecting their first child. Locals swore Thomas never truly left the mine. The lantern in the snow. The first recorded sighting came just weeks later. A watchman stationed near the mill claimed he saw a lone lantern bobbing along the ridge well after midnight. Thinking it was a worker, he climbed the trail to investigate. The tracks in the snow led partway up, then stopped. The lantern glow moved ahead another 50 feet, but when the watchman reached the spot, there was nothing there. No man, no prints, just silence. The town whispered, Thomas is still searching for a way out. The widow's cry. Thomas's widow, Mary Kent, claimed she too heard him. Neighbors said that in the weeks after the collapse, she would stand outside her cabin at night, weeping, insisting she could hear Thomas calling her name from the hills. On one night in February, her neighbor swore he saw a dark figure at her window, its hand pressed against the glass. By the time he rushed over, Mary was alone inside, trembling, pale, insisting Thomas had come to say goodbye. Within months, Mary left Silver Plume, but Thomas, it seemed, did not. Decades of sightings over the next century, the legend grew. Miners, travelers, and later tourists reported strange encounters. The details were eerily consistent. A tall figure in ragged mining clothes, a lantern glowing dimly, swinging in silence, the smell of coal smoke and damp earth, whispers echoing in the wind, sometimes calling names, sometimes murmuring prayers. In the 1930s, a maintenance worker for the Georgetown Loop Railroad refused to finish his job near Silver Plume after claiming he saw a man covered in soot vanish into the tunnel wall. His foreman laughed, until the same worker was found 2 days later, dead of a heart attack, his face frozen in terror. The 1970 backpackers, 2 hikers exploring abandoned tunnels near Silver Plume in 1970, stumbled on something that has haunted them for life. They entered a shaft, flashlights slicing through the dark. About 20 yards in, their beams caught a figure ahead. A man hunched over, his face hidden, holding a lantern that burned with an oddly green flame. "Hello?" one of them called. The figure slowly straightened. His face, if it was a face, was caked in black dust. Hollow eye sockets glared through them. Then, without a word, he turned and walked deeper into the mine. They followed for a moment, but then realized the sound of his footsteps was gone, though the light kept moving. When it finally faded into blackness, their flashlights sputtered and died. The 2 men fled, not stopping until they reached the highway. The ghost at the saloon, the Silver Plume Saloon, one of the few operating businesses left in town, has its own share of reports. Bartenders say that on certain winter nights, when snow batters the windows, the back door creaks open though no one enters. The smell of coal and iron fills the air, and glasses rattle on the shelves. One old bartender swears he once saw a man in a filthy mining coat sitting at the far end of the bar. He poured him a drink and watched in horror as the glass slid down the counter and tipped over, though the stool was empty. The modern trucker in 1998, a truck driver named Earl Simmons, was hauling supplies up I-70 when he decided to pull off at Silver Plume to rest. It was near midnight when he parked by the edge of town. Snow fell heavy, blanketing everything in white. Earl leaned back in his cab, half asleep, when he noticed a faint glow outside, a lantern, moving across the street. Curious, he climbed down and followed. The figure was just ahead, tall, broad-shouldered, with a bent posture, holding the swaying light. "Hey!" Earl shouted. The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned into an alley between 2 crumbling houses. Earl hurried after him, but when he stepped into the narrow gap, he froze. The alley was empty. Just snow, undisturbed. The lantern glow was gone. But in the silence, Earl heard something that made his stomach twist. A voice, low, hoarse. "Get back! Get back underground." Earl left town that night and never returned. Paranormal investigators in 2010, a team of ghost hunters visited Silver Plume, eager to document the legend. They set up cameras inside an abandoned boarding house once used by miners. For hours, nothing. But just after 3 a.m., one camera caught movement, a dim light swaying across the hall. Seconds later, a shadow passed in front of the lens. When the team reviewed the audio, they heard faint breathing. Then, a single word whispered close to the microphone. "Help." The footage has since circulated online. Debated fiercely, but many locals say it only proves what they've known for over a century. Thomas Kent never left Silver Plume. The curse of Silver Plume, some locals believe the haunting is more than just one miner. They claim the entire town is cursed, doomed by the greed and blood spilled during the Silver Rush. The mines were built on dangerous ground, with little regard for safety. Countless men died in collapses, fires, and explosions. Their bodies were often left buried where they fell, sealed into the rock forever. To this day, hikers sometimes report strange depressions in the earth, sudden cave-ins with no explanation, as if the ground itself remembers. And when the wind cuts through the valley, it often carries what sounds like voices, men crying out, begging to be freed. The present day, Silver Plume remains small, quiet, half-abandoned. But those who live there still see him. The phantom miner wandering with his lantern, searching for something he'll never find. Some nights, tourists on I-70 glance toward the dark cluster of buildings and swear they see a flickering light weaving through the trees. Some claim to hear faint hammering echo across the canyon, and occasionally, someone brave enough to enter the old mines comes back pale, shaking, insisting they saw a man in the dark, and that he followed them until they reached daylight. Final reflection: the phantom miner of Silver Plume is more than a campfire tale. His story is etched into the town's history, whispered by generations of locals, reinforced by endless sightings. Is he truly Thomas Kent, the young man crushed in the collapse of 1884? Or is he every miner who met his end in those dark shafts? Perhaps Silver Plume is simply too soaked in tragedy to rest. What's certain is this: Silver Plume feels different. Walk its streets after dark and you'll sense it, the weight of history pressing down, the silence that doesn't feel empty, the way your breath seems too loud against the mountain's stillness. And if you stay long enough, you may see it yourself. A flickering lantern in the night, bobbing just ahead, always just out of reach, the phantom miner and still wandering, still searching, forever lost in the shadows of Silver Plume. There are highways across America that carry more than cars. Some carry curses, some carry legends, and a few, like Riverdale Road in Thornton, Colorado, carry a reputation so dark that even locals avoid driving them after nightfall. Riverdale Road looks ordinary by day, a winding stretch of asphalt threading through cottonwoods and open plains. But as soon as the sun dips below the horizon, something changes. Shadows stretch longer than they should. The wind whispers through the trees like voices, and the darkness feels heavy, almost alive. Locals call it the most haunted road in Colorado, and for good reason. The legend of Riverdale begins with fire. Sometime in the mid-1800s, when the area was still sparsely settled, a man built a grand farmhouse along the road. Stories say he grew increasingly unstable, plagued by voices and fits of rage. One night he set fire to his own home. His family, wife, children, perished in the blaze. Witnesses claimed they saw him running from the flames, screaming into the night. His body was never found. To this day, drivers claim to see a burned man wandering near the road's edges, his face melted, his body charred, a glowing ember still flickering in his chest. Some call him the Lord of Riverdale, but the most well-known apparition is the Phantom Jogger. In the 1970s, a woman was jogging along Riverdale when she was struck and killed in a hit-and-run. The driver was never caught. Since then, countless drivers have reported the same chilling phenomenon. headlights catching a runner's figure along the shoulder. Sometimes she slaps the side of passing cars, leaving a dusty handprint that fades before dawn. Sometimes she appears directly in the lane, forcing drivers to swerve, only to vanish into thin air. One witness in 2003 swore that after his car was struck with a deafening thud, he pulled over, heart pounding. But when he checked the doors, the panels bore burned handprints, as if seared into the metal. Another layer of terror lies deeper. In the 1950s, the remains of several children were found in the woods near Riverdale. Rumors tied them to a cult, though no one was ever charged. Since then, travelers at night often hear children's laughter drifting through the trees, carried on the wind. Sometimes small figures dart across the road, pale, barefoot, vanishing when the high beams hit them. One couple driving home in 1991 swore they saw a group of children huddled under a tree, watching them silently as they passed. When they slowed to look back, the figures were gone. Perhaps the most infamous feature of Riverdale is what locals call the Gates of Hell. It was once a rusted set of iron gates standing in front of an abandoned mansion. Teenagers dared each other to visit at night, claiming that if you walked through the gates, you could hear screams rising from underground. Some even said claw marks appeared on cars parked nearby. Though the gates have since been torn down, the land remains. And those who wander too close often report feelings of dread, sudden nosebleeds, and the sensation of unseen hands pushing them back. Riverdale also carries its own lady in white legend. Drivers say a woman in a flowing white gown appears by the roadside, often waving her arms as if begging for help. Those who stop for her describe the same experience. She climbs inside, cold to the touch, silent. Moments later, she vanishes. And when the driver looks in the rearview mirror, they see her face for an instant, twisted, burned, screaming silently before fading away. One driver in 2016 posted online, "I will never take Riverdale again. I thought I was helping someone. I almost wrecked when she disappeared. And I swear I still hear her crying when I drive alone." In 2009, a long-haul trucker stopped his rig near Riverdale to stretch his legs. As he stepped onto the shoulder, he saw a figure moving toward him, a jogger. The man jogged past, his head low, his form blurred in the dark. But as the trucker turned to watch, his stomach dropped. The runner had no face, just smooth skin, reflecting moonlight. The jogger slowed, turned, and ran straight back toward him. Panicked, the trucker jumped into his cab and locked the doors. The figure slammed against the side of the truck with such force the trailer shook. Then nothing. Silence. When he finally drove off, he saw in his mirrors the faint outline of a runner keeping pace with him in the trees, for miles, before fading into the night. Other travelers speak of animals that aren't animals. Coyotes that walk on two legs, black dogs with glowing eyes, owls that perch in the middle of the road and refuse to move until cars pass directly through them, their bodies vanishing like mist. One paranormal team visiting Riverdale in 2018 recorded a series of low howls along the tree line. When the audio was slowed down, the howls formed words. One phrase repeated over and over, "Come back underground." Skeptics say Riverdale Road's legends are just that, stories born from boredom and local superstition. But there's a reason the road's reputation endures. The number of independent witnesses, the sheer consistency of the details, and the centuries of tragedy tied to its soil are difficult to dismiss. It's as if the land itself remembers. Every death, every fire, every cry of pain soaked into the dirt, rising again with each passing traveler. To this day, police still receive calls about Riverdale Road, reports of phantom cars with no drivers, headlights chasing travelers before vanishing, reports of people walking the shoulder, only to disappear when approached, and reports of slaps on car doors in the dead of night. One officer admitted off record, "We go out there when we get calls, but we never find anyone. I've been doing this 20 years, and I still won't drive Riverdale alone at night." Riverdale Road is more than asphalt. It's a collection of every nightmare Colorado has ever buried. The burned man, the phantom jogger, the lost children. The gates of hell. Every legend here overlaps, building into something larger, something more sinister. Perhaps Riverdale isn't haunted by a single ghost or tragedy, but by all of them, woven together into one endless nightmare that feeds on those who dare to travel it. So if you ever find yourself on Riverdale Road after midnight, windows down, engine humming through the darkness, Listen carefully. If you hear footsteps keeping pace with your car, if you hear a slap against the door, if you glimpse a flicker of white in your mirrors, don't stop, because some passengers you pick up on Riverdale Road never leave. By day, Riverdale Road looks harmless. Just another two-lane stretch of cracked asphalt cutting through cottonwoods and farmland on the outskirts of Thornton, Colorado. Its bends are sharp, its shoulders narrow, but to the casual traveler, it is unremarkable, a quiet connector between highways and neighborhoods. But ask the locals. Ask truckers who've pulled over there after dark. Ask the police who respond to phantom 911 calls from the roadside. Ask the people who swore they saw something, or someone, running alongside their cars at 3 in the morning. And you'll hear the same thing. Riverdale Road is not just haunted. It is cursed. It has been called the most haunted road in Colorado, and perhaps in the entire United States. Its legends intertwine into a tapestry of terror. A burned man who walks with smoldering skin, phantom joggers who strike cars in the night, children's laughter drifting from the trees, and gates that once led straight to hell. This is no ordinary haunted highway. Riverdale Road is a graveyard of tragedies, and every soul lost there seems to have stayed behind. The story begins with ash and ruin. In the mid-1800s, a wealthy settler built a sprawling mansion along what would become Riverdale Road. He was known to be violent, quick to rage. One winter night, locals say, he snapped. His home burned to the ground, flames lighting the valley like a beacon. His family, wife and children, perished inside. Witnesses reported seeing him running down the road, his body ablaze. High in the Rocky Mountains, tucked among crumbling headstones and pine-shadowed hills, lies the Central City Masonic Cemetery, a graveyard so steeped in legend that even the locals hesitate to enter after dark. Central City itself, founded in 1859 during the gold rush, was once called the richest square mile on Earth. Prospectors flocked there, chasing dreams of fortune. But gold is never struck without blood. Mining accidents, violent disputes, suicides, and sudden illnesses filled the ground with bodies faster than the town could handle. The dead were buried quickly, often without ceremony. Many graves lacked markers, others were lost to time. Some headstones now lean at odd angles, weathered by snow, chipped by vandals, swallowed by the earth. But the souls inside, they never left. The Lady in Black, the cemetery's most famous specter, is the Lady in Black. Witnesses describe her as elegant, cloaked in dark mourning clothes, her face hidden by a black veil. She is not a fleeting shadow or blurred figure. She appears fully formed, as real as any living woman, and she comes with flowers. For more than a century, people have reported seeing her walk the crooked rows of headstones, always carrying a bouquet of fresh roses. She places them gently at the grave of John Cameron, a wealthy man buried in 1885. No one knows who she is. Some say she was Cameron's lover, mourning him long after her own death. Others believe she is his spirit, returned to mourn herself. In 1980, a caretaker reported locking the cemetery gates at dusk. When he turned back, he saw a woman in black still inside, kneeling at Cameron's grave. Panicked, he rushed to unlock the gate, but when he turned back again, she was gone. The flowers remained. Children at play, it is not just mourners who linger. Visitors often hear the faint sounds of children laughing among the stones. Some swear they've seen them, small figures darting between trees, playing hide and seek. Their clothes are tattered, their faces pale. In the late 1800s, epidemics of scarlet fever and influenza swept through Central City. Entire families lost their children within weeks. The small graves still dot the hillside, marked with lamb carvings, angels, or just the word baby. One paranormal team in 2009 left toys as offerings. When they returned the next morning, the toys were scattered across the ground as if flung during play. Their audio recorders captured faint voices, one child giggling, another whispering, "Don't go." The music that plays, alone. A peculiar phenomenon haunts the cemetery at dusk: music. Several witnesses have reported hearing the distant sound of a piano, or sometimes a fiddle carried on the wind. But there are no houses nearby, no functioning instruments left in the cemetery. Historians say many miners carried fiddles to pass the lonely mountain nights, and saloons in Central City often rang with piano tunes. But why would the echoes of those melodies drift through the graveyard? One theory, the spirits of miners, still restless, play music to remind themselves of the lives they lost and to lure the living closer. A paranormal investigator once followed the sound deep into the cemetery. He claimed it grew louder the further he walked, until it stopped abruptly at an unmarked grave. His equipment failed, and when he replayed his recordings later, the faint strains of a fiddle played in reverse. The miner's curse. Not all the ghosts are gentle. Central City was fueled by greed. Prospectors killed each other over land, over gold, over nothing more than suspicion. Murders were common, and rumors of curses surrounded certain mines. It is said that some of those men, violent, vengeful, were buried in the Masonic cemetery. Visitors report sudden bursts of rage when near certain graves, arguments breaking out among groups, people feeling pushed or scratched by unseen hands. One woman in 1995 claimed she was shoved so hard she tumbled down a slope, breaking her ankle. She insisted a man's guttural laugh followed her fall, though no one else heard it. The man at the gate. The cemetery is watched over by more than caretakers. Several people describe encountering a man at the gates, tall, dressed in an outdated black suit wearing a wide-brimmed hat. He speaks politely, warning visitors that the cemetery is closed or that they should leave. But when they look away, even for a second, he vanishes. Some believe he was once a caretaker, bound to his duty even in death. Others whisper he is a guardian spirit keeping the dead contained, or keeping the living from joining them. The strange lights. Then there are the lights, blue orbs drifting between headstones, red sparks flashing like dying embers, lantern-like glows that bob along the hillside before fading into the soil. Skeptics say they are swamp gas or reflections of car headlights, but believers insist they move with intent, sometimes following visitors, other times leading them deeper into the cemetery's heart. In 2017, a hiker reported chasing a white orb that danced just out of reach. It led him to a sunken grave he hadn't noticed before. When he bent down, the ground beneath him collapsed slightly, exposing a piece of decayed coffin wood. He fled, swearing never to return. The unfinished burials, the rocky terrain of the mountains made burials difficult. Some graves were shallow, hastily dug. Over the years, erosion has exposed bones. Locals tell of children stumbling across skulls while playing. Visitors today sometimes describe the uneasy feeling of being watched, not from above, but from below. A sense that something under the soil is pushing upward, eager to be seen again. A paranormal researcher once pressed a recording device into the earth of an unmarked grave. The audio that returned was a low rhythmic sound. When analyzed, it resembled the pattern of knocking, as if someone beneath the soil was still demanding to be let out. Personal accounts. The stories are not just from history books. They keep happening. A tourist in 2014 snapped a photo of a grave only to find later a pale figure in the background, staring straight at the camera. No one else had been in the cemetery. A group of teens in 2001 left screaming after a voice growled directly into their ears. "Get out!" None of them had been standing close enough to each other to whisper. In 1987, a local pastor visited to pray over unmarked graves. He felt icy hands grip his shoulders so tightly he could not move for several seconds. Why Central City? Why does this cemetery remain so active when so many others fall silent? Some say it's because of unfinished business. Miners killed in disputes, lovers separated by death, children gone too soon. Others believe the Masonic rituals performed here long ago tethered spirits unnaturally to the ground. Another theory is geography. The cemetery sits high on a hill with veins of quartz and gold still running beneath it. Some paranormal researchers believe such minerals amplify spiritual energy, turning the site into a beacon for the dead. The cemetery today, despite its haunted reputation, the cemetery is still visited. Ghost tours lead the curious through its gates. Paranormal investigators set up cameras, recorders, and EMF. If there is one place in Colorado that has etched its name into horror history, it is the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. To the world, it is most famous as the inspiration for Stephen King's The Shining. But long before King spent his haunted night here, locals already whispered of phantoms. Long after, investigators still record sounds in empty rooms, lights in locked halls, and faces at windows when no guests are inside. The Stanley Hotel is more than a building. It is a vessel, a grand old mansion perched in the Rocky Mountains. That seems to hold on to everyone who's ever walked through its halls, alive or dead. The birth of a legend. The hotel was built in 1909 by Freeland Oscar Stanley, co-inventor of the Stanley steamer automobile. He came to Estes Park seeking fresh mountain air to cure his tuberculosis. Against all odds, he recovered, and to repay the land that gave him life, he built a luxury resort. But beneath the glamour, darkness lingered. Wealthy guests arrived from the east, many already ill. Some never left alive. Employees worked in grueling conditions, and not all escaped accidents. Over the decades, the building soaked up tragedies, secrets, and unfulfilled dreams. By the time Stephen King checked in for a single night in 1974, the hotel was already alive with whispers. King would leave with the seed of The Shining, but the Stanleys' true horrors are not fiction. The children of room 418. One of the most active rooms is 418. Guests who spend the night report the unmistakable sounds of children playing. Bed sheets are tugged during the night. Little footsteps patter across the carpet. Doors open and close when no one is there. Some guests claim they've seen small, translucent figures giggling at the foot of the bed. One woman in 2008 said she woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of children laughing in her closet. When she opened the door, the laughter stopped, replaced by the sound of someone breathing right next to her ear. No children were registered to stay in the hotel that night. The tragedy of room 217, room 217 is infamous, not only because it was where Stephen King stayed, but because of a real tragedy. In 1911, a gas leak caused an explosion in the room, destroying much of the second floor. A chambermaid named Elizabeth Wilson was caught in the blast. She survived, but her injuries were severe. To this day, staff and guests believe Elizabeth never left. Guests in 217 often find their luggage mysteriously unpacked, or shoes neatly lined up at the door. Men sometimes report being gently tucked into bed, as though Elizabeth still tends to her duties. But her presence is not always kind. Unmarried couples who stay in the room have reported an oppressive, angry energy, as though Elizabeth disapproves of their immorality. Some have even been shoved from the bed in the middle of the night. The Phantom Concerts. Stanley's Grand Ballroom holds its own ghostly legacy. Guests report the sound of piano music drifting through the night. Some say they've seen the piano keys move on their own. Others have spotted a woman in a long gown sitting at the bench, her hands gliding across the keys in silence. Hotel lore claims this is the spirit of Flora Stanley, the wife of the hotel's founder. She adored music and played the piano often. Even in death, she seems to linger, filling the hotel with the songs she loved. But witnesses say the music sometimes grows distorted, the melody warping into something dark, dissonant, echoing through empty halls until it abruptly cuts off, leaving silence thick enough to make ears ring. The man in the billiards room. Another presence haunts the billiards room, where F.O. Stanley himself once entertained guests. Multiple visitors report seeing a tall man with a mustache and formal suit standing by the fireplace or pacing the room. He nods politely when noticed, then fades away. Some believe it is Stanley himself, forever surveying the empire he built. Others whisper it is something darker wearing his face, a mimic that lures the curious closer. A paranormal investigator in 2015 claimed he followed the apparition into a corner, only for the figure to vanish. When the investigator turned around, every pool ball on the table had rolled into a perfect triangle by themselves. The underground tunnels beneath the Stanley lies a network of service tunnels once used by maids and workers to move unseen. Today, they are a labyrinth of stone and shadow, open only to tour groups, but many who enter report strange sensations, pressure on the chest, sudden cold spots, the feeling of being followed. One tour guest fainted after claiming she saw a man in a bowler hat crouched in the tunnel, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Another left in tears after hearing her name whispered 3 times, though no one in her group had spoken. The ghostly employees, the Stanley's workers, are as loyal in death as they were in life. A bellhop has been seen on the 4th floor. assisting guests with luggage before vanishing mid-task. A maid has been spotted dusting empty hallways. Several guests claim a man in uniform knocks on their door late at night, but when they open it, the hallway is empty. In 2013, security footage captured a transparent figure gliding across the lobby. The figure left no shadow, triggered no motion alarms, and vanished on camera. The darker side: not all presences at the Stanley are benevolent. Some guests describe waking in the night unable to breathe, as if something heavy is pressing on their chest. Others report hearing growls from the corners of their room, or scratching inside the walls. In the 1990s, a maintenance worker claimed he was shoved violently down a flight of stairs by unseen hands. When he landed, he heard footsteps walking away. Psychics who visit the hotel often describe a darker energy beneath the friendly spirits, something that feeds on fear. Stephen King's night of all who stayed. Perhaps no one was more shaken than Stephen King himself. He and his wife checked into room 217 just before the hotel closed for the season. That night, King dreamed of his son running through the halls, screaming, pursued by something terrible. He awoke trembling, staring into the dark. By dawn, the seed of The Shining was planted, but locals claim King's nightmare was not imagination. They believe he tapped into the hotel's true energy, the souls trapped inside, the corridors alive with dread, the spirits eager to make themselves known. The Stanley today. The Stanley embraces its haunted reputation. Ghost tours wind through the halls. Cameras flash at mirrors and investigators set up recorders in darkened rooms. Guests come from around the world, hoping for a brush with the unknown, and many leave with more than they bargained for. Photos reveal figures not seen with the naked eye. Recordings capture voices whispering names. Doors slam in empty corridors. The hotel does not hide its ghosts. It welcomes them. Final reflection. The Stanley Hotel stands as a monument, not only to Colorado's past, but to its eternal present. The dead here do not rest. They unpack your bags. They play music in the night. They walk the hallways as if nothing has changed. And when the lights go out, when the mountain winds press against the windows and silence fills the grand old rooms, the hotel feels less like a building and more like a living thing, waiting, breathing, watching. So if you ever book a stay at the Stanley, remember, you might check in for a night, but the ghosts who live there will follow you home forever. The mountains of Colorado have always carried whispers of miners. The Rocky Mountains have always been unforgiving. In the late 1800s, they lured men with the promise of gold, only to swallow them in avalanches, cave-ins, or slow madness in the cold. Few places saw more of this than Cripple Creek. Colorado, once called the world's greatest gold camp. By 1900, more than 30,000 miners swarmed the area, their lanterns flickering in tunnels that clawed miles into the earth. Riches poured out, but so did blood. Explosions, collapsed shafts, poisoned lungs. The mountain demanded a toll for every ounce of gold taken from it, and when the mines finally closed, something remained behind. Something that did not rest. They call him the Phantom Miner, the man who never left. Legends say he was once a real miner, though no one remembers his name. Some call him Patrick, others Thomas, others Red Jack. What they agree on is that he was cruel in life. He drank heavily, fought with co-workers, and was rumored to have murdered another miner during a dispute over a gold vein. The mountain punished him. In 1894, a cave-in trapped him and 5 others deep underground. When rescuers finally reached them 4 days later, only he was alive. His eyes were wild, his face smeared with blood, his breath foul. He muttered that the others had fed him. Whether he meant spiritually or literally, no one wanted to know. The town tried to hush the story, but after his release, he was never the same. Not long after, he vanished. Some say into the mines again, some say into the snowstorm that took him. His body was never recovered. First sightings, not long after his disappearance, miners began reporting strange encounters underground. Lanterns would flicker and die, plunging men into darkness. In that silence, they'd hear boots scraping the gravel, heavy breathing, the dragging of a pickaxe against the wall. One man swore he saw a figure at the end of a tunnel, hunched, with a shattered helmet, his face hidden beneath a beard matted with dirt. The figure raised a lantern, but the flame burned black. When the man screamed, the figure vanished, but his co-workers found him hours later, trembling, unable to speak. He never returned to the mines. By 1907, the phantom miner was a common warning whispered in taverns. "If you hear his pickaxe, get out," they'd say, because he's digging for more than gold. He's digging for you. The miner's curse. Locals believed the miner was cursed to wander the shafts for eternity, searching for the souls of those who had wronged him. But there were darker theories. Some claimed the mountain itself had claimed him, transforming him into its guardian. A spirit of vengeance punishing those who dared steal from its veins. Whatever the truth, reports spread. Miners claimed to wake from naps to find their tools rearranged. Some said unseen hands shoved them toward open shafts. Others described cold breath against their neck, even when standing alone. And then there were the disappearances. Between 1910 and 1920, at least 6 miners vanished without trace. Search parties scoured tunnels, found discarded helmets and lamps, but no bodies. In every case, co-workers reported hearing the sound of a pickaxe striking stone, echoing through the dark just before the men disappeared. The 1950 collapse after the boom ended. Most mines closed, leaving Cripple Creek to shrink into near ghost town status. But one incident kept the legend alive. In 1950, a group of explorers entered the abandoned Independence mine. They were young men from Colorado Springs, curious thrill seekers with flashlights and whiskey. Hours later, townsfolk heard a distant rumble, a collapse. Rescue teams rushed in and pulled 3 of the men out alive. But the 4th, named Joseph, was buried deep inside. When they recovered his body days later, it was not crushed. Instead, his neck was snapped cleanly, his face frozen in an expression of raw terror. Nearby, carved into the stone, was a single message. "He took me." No tool marks matched the carving. The rock appeared to have been gouged with bare hands. Modern hauntings today, Cripple Creek is more casino town than mining camp. But its ghost tours bring visitors into the old shafts, where the legend of the phantom miner still thrives. Tourists report the same things the miners once did: flickering lamps, footsteps echoing in empty corridors, whispers in the dark. Some claim to hear the sound of rock shifting, as if tunnels were about to collapse, only for the noise to stop the moment they panic. One woman on a 2009 tour fainted after seeing a man in outdated miner's gear standing behind the group. His face was pale, sunken, with blackened teeth. When the guide turned, he was gone. EVP recordings from ghost hunters capture the sound of pickaxes striking stone, though no one is swinging them. In one chilling clip, a voice growls, "Get out! It's mine." The curse on visitors, it isn't just miners who encounter him. Several stories tell of tourists taking small rocks as souvenirs from the abandoned shafts. Weeks later, they report nightmares of a bearded man at the foot of their bed holding a lantern that glows black. Some say they hear scraping sounds in their home, as though a pickaxe is carving through their walls. One family mailed back a stone with a note: "Please return this to where it belongs. Since we took it, we haven't slept." Locals warn visitors, "Never take anything from Cripple Creek. The miner will come for you." The tunnel of no return. The most feared place in Cripple Creek is the Orphan Boy Mine, abandoned after multiple deaths in the early 1900s. Explorers say the mine tunnels seem to shift. No matter how carefully they map their route, paths loop back on themselves, as if something is leading them deeper. Some claim to hear a voice whispering directions, promising gold, urging them forward. In 1994, 2 college students entered the Orphan Boy for a photography project. Only one emerged. He was incoherent, his hair turned white overnight. He never spoke of what happened. Only that the miner showed him the way. The other student was never found. The shadow at the shaft to this day. Locals claim to see a figure at the mouths of old mine shafts at dusk. A tall man in ragged clothes, helmet cracked, lantern swinging. He never moves toward town. He only waits, watching. Some say if you stare too long, he raises his pickaxe, and the next time you blink, he's closer. A living curse. The phantom miner is not a ghost bound to one place. He is tied to the mountain itself. His anger, his hunger, his curse, it breathes through every abandoned shaft, every trembling tunnel. And the strangest part? Cripple Creek still prospers on what killed him. The casinos, the tourism, the ghost tours. They all profit from the mountain. Some believe that's why the legend grows stronger. The more people laugh, the more they exploit, the more they mock, the more he waits, lantern glowing in the dark. Final reflection. The Phantom Miner is more than a story. He is a warning. He reminds us that the earth remembers, that every ounce of gold was paid for in flesh, and that debt never truly disappears. So if you ever walk the tunnels of Cripple Creek, listen carefully. If you hear the strike of metal against stone, or see the faint glow of a lantern deep in the dark, turn back, because the Phantom Miner doesn't dig for treasure anymore. He digs for souls. The Rocky Mountains are a graveyard of promises. For centuries, men have descended into their dark veins, chasing fortune, only to find something else entirely: silence, collapse, and death. Few places carry this weight more heavily than Cripple Creek, Colorado. Once a booming gold camp, now a casino town haunted by memories and, some say, by something much worse. Ask the locals, and they'll tell you about the Phantom Miner, a restless figure who still roams the abandoned tunnels and forgotten shafts, his lantern glowing faintly in the dark. He is not a ghost of one man, they warn. He is the spirit of all who died beneath the mountain, fused into something hungrier than death itself. This is his story. The gold rush and the curse of the mountain in the late 1800s. Cripple Creek erupted with the discovery of gold. By 1900, more than 30,000 people lived there, hacking and blasting their way into the mountain. The air reeked of sulfur and smoke, and at night, the entire valley glowed with lanterns and smelters. The riches were real, but so was the blood. Mine accidents were common. Men suffocated on gas. Shafts collapsed without warning, entombing crews alive. Dynamite misfires tore bodies apart. The town buried its dead quickly. But rumors spread that the mountain itself demanded sacrifice. One man, however, seemed destined to become its most infamous victim. No one remembers his real name. He went by Red Jack, a burly Irishman with a reputation for cruelty. Stories say he was violent, a drunk who picked fights in saloons and carried a pickaxe like a weapon. Some whispered he'd murdered another miner who struck a promising vein. Others said he cheated at cards, threatened men with knives, and stole from claim partners. Whether he was wicked or simply desperate, fate caught him. In 1894, a collapse trapped Red Jack and 5 other miners deep underground. For 4 days, rescuers clawed through the rubble to reach them. When they finally broke through, they found only Jack alive. His eyes were wild, his beard matted with blood. He refused food, but his lips were smeared crimson. Around him, the others lay mutilated, but not crushed. When asked what happened, he muttered only, "They fed me." The town tried to bury the horror, blaming starvation and madness. But men whispered that Jack had eaten his co-workers in the dark. Weeks later, he vanished. Some say he wandered back into the tunnels. Others claim the mountain swallowed him whole. His body was never recovered. Denver, Colorado is filled with landmarks that speak to its rich past. But few stand as proudly or as eerily as the Molly Brown House, a Victorian mansion resting on Pennsylvania Street, just a short walk from downtown. By day, it is a museum, celebrated for preserving the story of Margaret Molly Brown, the socialite and philanthropist remembered worldwide as one of the heroes who survived the sinking of the Titanic. But by night, this home carries a different reputation. Staff, guests, and investigators have reported things that cannot be explained. Footsteps in empty hallways, the rustle of skirts brushing against doors, and whispers that seem to come from the very walls themselves. Some say it is Molly herself who still walks the corridors of her beloved home. Others whisper that it's not just her, but every piece of sorrow the house has ever witnessed. The story of the Molly Brown House is not just one of survival, but one of spirits who refuse to be silenced. The woman behind the legend, Margaret Brown, later immortalized as the unsinkable Molly Brown, was born in 1867 and became one of Denver's most famous residents. After marrying mining engineer J.J. Brown, She moved into the Grand Victorian Mansion in 1894. The Browns' marriage was stormy, full of separations and reconciliations. The house saw grand parties, heated arguments, moments of triumph, and long stretches of loneliness. When the Titanic sank in April 1912, Molly became a hero. She rallied passengers in lifeboat number 6, comforting children and even threatening to throw a sailor overboard if he didn't return for survivors. Newspapers around the world praised her courage, but when she returned home, friends said she was never the same. Her sleep was restless. She avoided mirrors, claiming she sometimes saw faces of the drowned reflected in them, and the house, once filled with laughter, grew heavy. First reports of activity after Molly's death in 1932. The mansion changed hands. Tenants described strange disturbances, furniture shifting on its own, cold spots in rooms with no drafts, the smell of pipe smoke in the parlor, though no one smoked inside. One woman who rented a room in the 1940s swore she was awakened nightly by a woman in a long Victorian dress standing at her bedside. The apparition would not move or speak, but simply stared with sad, unblinking eyes until dawn's light erased her. The restless figure on the stair staff members today frequently report footsteps on the grand staircase, even after closing. Tour guides have described the sensation of someone brushing past them, skirts brushing wood, the faintest hint of perfume. One guide swears she once turned quickly enough to catch sight of the figure, a woman in period clothing, her features unmistakably matching photographs of Molly Brown herself. She wasn't frightening, the guide later admitted, but she looked unsettled, as if she was still waiting for something. Or someone, the Titanic echoes many. Visitors believe Molly's lingering presence is tied directly to the Titanic disaster. Psychics who have visited the home claim the house is not haunted by just one spirit, but by dozens. Survivors Molly comforted in those long hours at sea, passengers who drowned, even sailors lost in the icy Atlantic. They are said to follow her, drawn to her strength, unable to move on without her. This could explain why guests sometimes report sounds that don't belong in a Victorian home at all. The creaking of a ship's hull under strain, the roar of rushing water, and the panicked cries of unseen voices. One school group in 2005 reported hearing distressed banging on the basement walls, like fists hammering for escape. The guide dismissed it as plumbing, until the banging grew louder, sharper, and the group fled the house in terror. The piano that plays itself, another recurring phenomenon, takes place in the parlor. Molly loved music and often entertained guests with performances on her upright piano. Today, long after her death, the piano is said to still produce faint notes. Staff locking up for the night have reported single keys striking on their own, or full chords played softly, as if by a careful hand. One museum worker recorded the sounds on her phone in 2012. The audio is chilling, not random clanging, but the opening notes of "Nearer, My God, to Thee." That hymn was reported as one of the last played by the Titanic's band before the ship sank beneath the waves. The second floor shadows. The second floor of the mansion is particularly active. Guests have reported cold bursts of air strong enough to extinguish candles, even on windless nights. Some describe shadows moving beneath the door frames of locked rooms. One paranormal team captured video footage of a dark silhouette gliding across the hallway. But when they investigated, the corridor was empty. The most chilling encounter came from a volunteer who was cataloging clothing from Molly's collection. She left the room briefly and returned to find one of the dresses displayed on a mannequin, though she had not touched it. When she turned to leave, she swore she heard a woman's voice whisper, "Do not forget me." The basement apparition. While most of the ghostly activity seems tied to Molly, there are darker presences in the house. The basement is particularly unsettling. Workers have reported the sensation of being watched, and some have claimed to see a shadowy male figure crouched in the corners. His face is never visible, but his form moves as though burdened with invisible weight. Speculation ties this to Molly's husband, J.J. Brown, whose drinking and business failures drove them apart. Some believe he lingers in shame, bound to the home where his fortune rose and fell. Others think the figure is tied to Titanic survivors who perished after rescue, spirits broken and displaced, who found their way back to the one woman who had tried to save them. The mirror face is one of the most unnerving reports. comes from visitors who linger in the home's mirrors. Multiple guests over the decades have sworn they saw faces not their own reflected back, not threatening but desperate, pale, wet, their mouths opening and closing as if gasping for breath. Survivors claim these are the faces of Titanic victims, forever following Molly, forever caught in the moment of drowning. One teenager fainted after swearing she saw a child's handprint appear on the mirror, smearing as though dragged downward beneath water. The print faded before staff could verify it. The call from upstairs in 2017. A private evening tour was interrupted by a sound that chilled every guest present. As the guide led them toward the stairs, a woman's voice rang out from the second floor. Clear, commanding, come back. The group froze. Every room upstairs was locked. No motion sensors triggered. No one was inside. Several guests refused to continue and left immediately. The weight of history skeptics dismissed the hauntings as tricks of atmosphere, creaking wood, bad wiring, suggestive storytelling. But those who have experienced it know better. The Molly Brown house carries more than history. It carries trauma. The trauma of a woman who witnessed one of the worst disasters in modern history. The trauma of survivors who clung to her, only to fade into obscurity. The trauma of lives cut short, dreams drowned in icy water, and perhaps Molly herself. Still restless, still pacing her beloved home, still hearing the cries of those she could not save. Final reflection. The unsinkable Molly Brown was a woman who refused to surrender to tragedy. But in death, her story is not so simple. Her home remains alive with shadows, whispers, and faces that are not her own. And when visitors walk its halls today, they step not just into a museum, but into a lingering tragedy that stretches from Denver to the icy waters of the North Atlantic. So if you ever visit the Molly Brown house at night, take heed. Listen for the faint notes of a piano that no one is playing. Watch the mirrors carefully, but not too long. And when you feel the brush of unseen skirts against your arm, remember, Molly Brown may have survived the Titanic, but perhaps her spirit has never escaped it. By day, Cheeseman Park in Denver, Colorado looks ordinary. Joggers circle its grassy expanse, children play beneath cottonwoods, and couples picnic under the Colorado sun. But as dusk falls and shadows lengthen, the air shifts. The silence grows heavy, the trees whisper, and something ancient stirs beneath the ground. For Cheeseman Park was never meant to be a park. It was once a graveyard, and not just any graveyard, but one defiled in ways so grotesque that the earth itself still seems to mourn. Today, ghost stories swirl around its open lawns and historic mansions. Witnesses speak of phantom figures gliding through the grass, cold hands pressing on shoulders, whispers rising from the soil. Some even say entire patches of the park pulse with restless energy, as if hundreds of voices cry out in silence. This is the story of how a graveyard became a playground, and why its dead refused to rest. The Cemetery of the Forgotten in 1858. As Denver sprang to life during the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, a large burial ground was carved into the prairie. It was named Mount Prospect Cemetery, but locals quickly nicknamed it Boot Hill. It was never sacred ground. From the beginning, the dead buried here were outcasts, paupers, drifters, criminals, the homeless, prostitutes, and victims of violence. Many were unidentified, dumped in shallow graves. By the 1870s, the cemetery had fallen into disrepair. Graves sank, markers rotted, weeds overtook the land. Locals complained that livestock wandered among bones scattered across the soil. Denver wanted the land for something grander, a public park, so the decision was made.